Welcome to the Books Bible Study, where we are continuing to go through the Bible chapter by chapter. We're doing 2 chapters a day. We will be happy for you to join us. Today we are on Genesis chapter 43, verse 1. Now the famine was severe in the land. Verse 2. And it came to pass, when they had eaten up the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, Go back, buy us a little food. Verse 3. But Judah spoke to him, saying, The man solemnly warned us, saying, You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. Verse 4. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. So remember, in the last chapter, Joseph called them spies and told them to come back with Benjamin, their youngest brother, to prove that there wasn't. I believe he was testing them, right? And he really wanted to see his younger brother. Okay, so verse 5 says, this is Judah. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. Verse 6. And Israel said, Why did you deal so wrongfully with me as to tell the man whether you still had another brother? Right? So has anyone else figured this out? Why in some places it uses Jacob, and in other places, even in the same chapter, he's called Israel. That's something I've been asking the last couple of chapters. So if anybody has figured that out, let me know. Verse 7 says, But they said, The man asked us pointedly about ourselves and our family, saying, Is your father still alive? Have you another brother? And we told him according to these words. Could we possibly have known that he would say, Bring your brother down? Verse 8. Then Judah said to Israel his father, Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. So they're not just in need for food for themselves, the 12, the 10, because Simeon is with Joseph now. It was Jacob, it was their sons, their wives, children, right? Also, Jacob had servants as well. And then Judah says in verse 9, I myself will be surety for him. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. Now, Judah, you already to blame for Joseph, okay? But let's continue. Verse 10. For if we had not lingered, surely by now we would have returned this second time. Verse 11. And their father Israel said to them, If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best fruits of the land in your vessels and carry down a present for the man, a little balm and a little honey, spices and myrrh, pistachio nuts and almonds. So even though there was a famine, somehow Jacob and his boys and their families still had a little bit. Okay, it may not have been what they wanted, but they still had enough to give such a present to Joseph. Verse 12 says, he said, Take double money in your hand, and take back in your hand the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Verse 13. Take your brother also, and arise, go back to the man. Verse 14. And may God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may release your other brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved. So Jacob realizes, or Israel, realizes that he must trust his youngest sons in the hands of his brothers, okay, in order to feed his nation. Verse 15. So the man took that present and Benjamin, and they took double money in their hand and arose and went down to Egypt. And they stood before Joseph. Verse 16. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, Take these men to my home and slaughter an animal and make ready, for these men will dine with me at noon. Verse 17. Then the man did as Joseph ordered, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. Verse 18. Now the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house, and they said, It is because of the money, which was returned in our sacks the first time that we are brought in, so that he may make a case against us and seize us to take us as slaves with our donkeys. Verse 19. When they drew near to the steward of Joseph's house, they talked with him at the door of the house. Verse 20, and said, O sir, we indeed came down the first time to buy food. 21. But it happened when we came to the encampment that we opened our sacks, and there each man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it back in our hand. Verse 22. And when we have brought down other money, and we have brought down other money in our hands to buy food, we do not know who put our money in our sacks. Verse 23. But he said, Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. Verse 24. So the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys feed. Verse 25. Then they made the present ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they would eat bread there. Verse 26. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed down before him to the earth. Do y'all remember the dream? Okay. Verse 27. Then he asked them about their well-being and said, Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive? Verse 28. And they answered, Your servant, our father, is in good health. He is still alive. And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves. Verse 29. Then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, Is this your younger brother of whom you spoke to me? And he said, God be gracious to you, my son. Verse 30. Now his heart yearned for his brother, so Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. And he went into his chamber and wept there. So he really desired to see Benjamin. He wasn't trying to play some trick on him. He really wanted to see his younger brother. And so far we know that he's been there over 20 years, right? That he's been away from his father's family. And so this had to be hard for him. But even though they sold him into slavery, he still saw to it that they would receive food for their households, right? Their idea to sell him actually turned out to be the very thing that would save them in this famine, right? So often we look at what we believe to be bad circumstances, and we don't have a clue about what it has saved us from or even pointed us toward. And that's why we have to exchange our perspective, right, for God's perspective, because then you find out if it's a setup, right, to protect you, to prosper you, right, to place you where you should be, versus the places that you're trying to put yourself in that's actually going to destroy you. But sometimes circumstances that you are put in leaves you no other choice but to follow God, right? So we want to exchange our perspective for God's perspective, as we see with Joseph and his brothers. Verse 31 says, Then he washed his face. This is after he left them to go weep. It says, Then he washed his face and came out, and he restrained himself and said, Serve the bread. Verse 32. So they set him a place by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. So this is why you understand why it was a big deal, why Jesus was eating with the sinners. Why was he talking to this Samaritan woman? Because the cultures did not mix. There were separate customs for each group, along with their separate list of abominations, right? How they came up with these, we really don't know yet. We will find as we read further that God will give his standard according to their customs, right? But it's not telling us yet where God actually spoke and said, like, to give these certain sacrifices or to build these altars. The only thing we do see is where he told Abraham to circumcise all of the men in his camp, right? That was the thing that would make them separate. But before that, they were giving sacrifices, they were building altars, they were worshiping God. But we will see later where God kind of gives them his standard for their custom. Okay. So verse 33 says, And they set before him the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked in astonishment at one another. 34. Then he took servants to them from before him, but Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they drank and were merry with him. So they went from a famine to feasting in the second in command's home, right? Do you have the ability to serve those that have wronged you in this way, right? Or do you try to match their evil? Do you try to match their energy? I think is the term that we're using these days, right? Would you rather someone die, right, because of what they did to you, when what they did to you actually blessed you, actually put you in a better position, right? And some people are still mad at people for what they did, but it actually caused you to be better. And so let us learn from Joseph in these last few chapters. The reason why we may not be where we should be or where we could be is because maybe our hearts won't be kind in that elevated place, right? In the position that God puts us. We need to learn how to extend grace to other people. You may not be able to get that promotion or get that business off the ground because you're willing to step on other people once you get to that place. And so we have to change our heart posture, right? So that we can be where God intends for us to be, with the right heart, with the right mind, right? With the right spirit. Because we want to have what God intends for us to have, right? To be a blessing to those that are in need, those that are less fortunate to us, whether we feel that they deserve it or not, right? Each chapter that we read is a lesson, it's a life lesson. And hopefully, we are taking an account and looking in the mirror at ourselves to ensure that we are living a life that is pleasing to God first, right? Not what we think, not what others think, but our lives must be pleasing to God first and foremost. So that concludes chapter 43. Stay tuned with us for chapter 44. God bless.